Billionaire hid behind the door to test his fiancée. What she did next broke his heart. The door eased shut with a whisper so soft it sounded like a secret being sealed, and in that instant Victor Halle realized there would be no turning back. His breath slowed to a measured hush as he pressed himself into the narrow shadow between marble wall and steel frame, the chill of the vault door seeping through his tailored suit. Beyond the thin crack, light spilled like molten gold, glinting off stacked bars and towers of cash that represented decades of ruthless victories. His pulse thudded in his ears, each beat counting down to a truth he was no longer sure he wanted to hear. This was supposed to be Control One last test before marriage, a quiet confirmation that love stood untouched by wealth. But as footsteps approached and the vault lights hummed alive, fear slithered through him, sharp and electric. Because tests had a way of revealing more than answers. Sometimes they revealed endings. The handle turned. A click echoed like a gunshot in Victor's chest. Claire Morgan stepped inside, and the air seemed to tighten around her. She didn't gasp. She didn't smile. Her eyes swept the room with deliberate calm, absorbing the obscene abundance with a precision that made Victor's stomach knot. The gold glowed behind her like a false sun, the cash stacked in brutal symmetry, and for one breathless second, Victor imagined the life they had planned dissolving right there between steel shelves and silent alarms. He had built empires by trusting his instincts, by watching people when they thought no one was looking. Now, hidden behind a door, he waited for the woman he loved to show him who she really was, unaware that whatever happened next would fracture his heart in ways no amount of money could ever repair. Victor Halle had always believed that power revealed itself in silence. In boardrooms, power shouted through numbers, projections, and signatures. In private, it whispered through choices made when no one was watching. The vault was his cathedral of truth, a place designed not for comfort but for confession. Every gold bar had been logged, every bundle of cash recorded, every document cataloged with surgical precision. This room had never betrayed him. People did not. Claire took a step forward. Her heels clicked once, then stopped. Victor closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, steadying his breath. He remembered the first time he'd seen her standing alone at a charity gala, unbothered by the men circling her like satellites, laughing freely when the power cut out and the room fell into darkness. She'd said darkness made people honest. He had believed her. He had wanted that honesty for himself. She moved closer to the shelves, not touching, just looking. Victor's fingers dug into the seam of the wall. The plan had been simple. He would pretend to forget his phone, hide behind the door, and watch. If she reacted with awe, maybe curiosity, fine. If she reached for the gold with greedy hunger, the truth would be ugly but necessary. What he had not planned for was the stillness, the careful restraint in her movements. The way she seemed to weigh the room itself before. Acting. Claire's gaze drifted to the vim pozum quojen quojom gorging. Claire's gaze drifted to the fantemfemon matte black folders stacked neatly on a lower shelf. Contracts, trusts, contingencies. The architecture of Victor Hale's life. She crouched and pulled one free. Victor's heart stuttered. She opened it. The sound of paper turning was deafening. Victor leaned closer, the edge of the door pressing into his shoulder. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about knowledge. About understanding the machinery behind the fortune. Claire read slowly at first, then faster. Her brow furrowed, lips pressing into a thin line. Victor felt a cold sweat form at the base of his neck. He had never shown her this side of his world, not fully. He'd kept things abstract, distant, wrapped in romance and promises of freedom. Watching her read felt like watching someone disassemble him piece by piece. Unbelievable. She murmured. Victor flinched. She set the folder down carefully, as if it were fragile. Then she stood and crossed to the cash stacks, lifting one bundle and weighing it in her hand. Her expression wasn't greedy. It was analytical. She set it back exactly where it had been, aligning the edges with meticulous care. Victor's thoughts spiraled. He told himself this was still a test. Still controlled. But the silence between them stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Claire reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Victor's chest constricted. She hesitated, then typed. The soft taps echoed like a countdown. Victor imagined headlines, lawsuits, betrayal unfolding faster than he could stop it. He had gambled everything on this moment, his trust, his future, his heart. She raised the phone to her ear. "It's open," she said quietly. Victor's knees nearly buckled. Yes, all of it. He squeezed his eyes shut, anger and despair crashing together. He had wanted certainty. Instead, he felt foolish, an emperor hiding behind a door, listening to his empire being discussed like a prize. Claire paced as she listened, nodding. "No, I'm not taking anything yet. I need to understand what this means." A pause. "Because if I'm right, this isn't about money. It's about what he's afraid of." Victor's breath caught in his throat. She ended the call and stared at the gold. The light reflected in her eyes, but there was no hunger there, only conflict. She took off her jacket and folded it neatly, rolling up her sleeves like someone preparing for work. The gesture was intimate, practical, devastating. She pulled a black transport bag from beneath the table and opened it. Victor's heart slammed against his ribs. She crouched, reaching for the cash, and stopped. Her hand trembled mid-air. "No," she said aloud, firm and shaking all at once. "This isn't right." Victor's mind reeled. She stood abruptly, pacing again, hands fisting at her sides. "You don't test someone like this," she said, voice cracking. "You don't hide behind doors and call it love." Victor pressed his forehead against the wall, shame burning hot in his chest. Claire picked up the phone again. "I'm not doing it," she said into the receiver. "I won't take a single dollar." A pause. "Because if I do, I become exactly what he's afraid I am." She hung up and looked around the vault one last time. Her eyes glistened, but her posture remained unbroken. Slowly, deliberately, she closed the vault. The heavy door sealed shut with a final, echoing thud. The lights dimmed. The gold disappeared. Claire rested her palm against the steel, eyes closed. "I loved you without all of this," she whispered. "And you still didn't believe me." Victor felt something inside him crack clean and irreversible. Claire retrieved her jacket, slipping it on with practiced composure. She turned toward the door, then paused, eyes lifting as if she could see straight through the steel and marble to where he stood. "If you're listening," she said softly, "then you already know what you've lost." The door opened. Footsteps faded. Victor remained hidden, alone with his fortune and the devastating truth that the test he had designed to protect, his heart had exposed its greatest weakness. Asterisk. The silence that followed Claire's departure was heavier than any vault door Victor had ever closed. He stayed hidden long after her footsteps disappeared, as if remaining in the shadows might somehow rewind time. His breath came shallow, uneven, and when he finally stepped out, the marble floor felt unfamiliar beneath his shoes, like he was standing in a stranger's life. Victor closed the door behind him and leaned against it, eyes fixed on the spot where Claire had stood moments earlier. The vault lights flickered back on, obedient and cold. Gold bars gleamed. Cash lay untouched. His empire remained intact. Yet for the first time in his life, Victor Halle felt bankrupt. He replayed every second in his mind with ruthless precision, the way he reviewed hostile takeovers and failed negotiations. Her restraint. Her words. The way she'd refuse the money not because she couldn't take it, but because she wouldn't. The test had not failed. He had Victor sank onto the leather bench against the wall, running a hand through his hair. For years he had believed love was a liability, something to be audited, controlled, insured against loss. His childhood had taught him that. He'd grown up watching his father ruined by trust partners who smiled while bleeding him dry. A marriage that collapsed under secrets and resentment. Money had been Victor's shield ever since. If he controlled everything, nothing could hurt him. Until Claire. She had slipped past his defenses quietly, without force. She hadn't demanded access to his world. She hadn't asked for explanations. She had simply believed him. And when he doubted her, when he chose suspicion over faith, she had walked away with her integrity intact. Victor stood abruptly, the bench scraping against the floor. He pulled out his phone, fingers hovering over her name. Claire Morgan, fiancée. The word burned. No, not yet. He needed to understand everything, especially the call she'd made. If I'm right, this isn't about money. It's about what he's afraid of. The words echoed mercilessly. Who had she called? A lawyer? A friend? Someone she trusted more than him? Victor exited the vault and strode down the corridor, security lights responding to his presence. At the far end, he entered his private office and activated the wall screen. Pull security logs, he said. Vault corridor. Last 30 minutes. The system complied instantly. Victor watched the footage with a clenched jaw. There he was slipping behind the door, heart pounding like a thief in his own house. Then Claire, entering calm and composed. The footage had no sound, but he didn't need it. He could see the hesitation in her hands, the moment of conflict, the resolve hardening in her posture. When she raised her phone, Victor paused the footage and zoomed in. Facial recognition scanned her expression, analyzing stress markers, emotional cues. The results flashed on screen. No indicators of deceit. Elevated emotional distress. Moral conflict detected. Victor exhaled sharply and shut the system down. He poured himself a drink, though he barely tasted it. His mind drifted to the early days, coffee shops, long walks, laughter that didn't care who he was. She'd once told him she was afraid of losing herself in someone else's world. He had promised her she never would. And then he built a trap to prove it. The house felt cavernous that night. Every room echoed with absence. Victor wandered from space to space like a ghost, memories clinging to the walls. Claire's books still lined the shelves. Her scarf hung over the back of a chair. The faint scent of her perfume lingered, cruel and comforting all at once. At midnight, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. She's safe. She told me everything. Victor's heart lurched. He typed back instantly. Who is this? 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Appeared again. My name is Elena Morgan. I'm her sister. Victor closed his eyes. She didn't take anything, Elena continued. Not money. Not documents. Not a single photo. She left because she realized she was being tested. Not trusted. Victor sat heavily on the edge of the bed. She loves you, the message went on. But she won't beg to be believed. Victor stared at the screen, his throat tight. He typed, deleted, typed again. Tell her I'm sorry, he finally wrote. Tell her I was wrong. The response came after a long pause. You should tell her yourself. If you still can. The line went dead. Victor lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, replaying every choice that had led him here. By morning, he had made a decision, one that terrified him more than any hostile takeover ever had. He would do the unthinkable. He would dismantle the test. At sunrise, Victor called his legal team. He canceled the prenuptial agreement. Every clause. Every safeguard. He instructed his attorneys to draft a new one, simple, transparent, optional. He ordered the vault reorganized, the gold moved to institutional storage, the cash digitized. No more shrines to paranoia hidden behind steel doors. Then he did something even more dangerous. He left the house. Victor Halle, the man who controlled everything, stepped into the city without an entourage, without security, without leverage. He drove himself to the small apartment Claire had once mentioned in passing, the place she'd kept after moving in with him. Just in case. The building was modest, ordinary, honest. Victor stood outside for a long time, doubt gnawing at him. He had spent his life testing others. Now, for the first time, he was the one being tested by humility, by accountability, by the simple act of knocking on a door with no guarantee it would open. He raised his hand. Paused. Lowered it again. Then, finally, he knocked. No answer. His chest tightened. He knocked again, softer this time. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened a few inches. Claire stood there. She looked tired. Not broken, just guarded. Her eyes flicked past him, searching for cameras, for tricks. "There's no one with me," Victor said quietly. "No tests. No doors. No vaults." She studied him for a long moment. "Why are you here, Victor?" He swallowed. "Because I hid behind a door when I should have stood in front of you." Silence stretched between them, fragile as glass. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "I don't even expect you to listen. I just needed you to know I chose fear over trust, and I lost you because of it." Claire's grip tightened on the doorframe. "And now?" she asked. Victor met her gaze, unshielded. "Now I'm choosing honesty, even if it costs me everything." The door remained half-open. Not closed. Not yet. Claire did not invite Victor inside. She didn't ask him to leave either. The door remained half open, balanced between two futures, and the tension between them was sharp enough to draw blood. "You don't get to decide when honesty matters," she said finally, her voice calm but edged with steel. "You don't get to shatter someone's trust and then show up asking for absolution like it's a business deal." Victor nodded once. "You're right." The simplicity of his answer unsettled her more than any excuse would have. "I'm not here to negotiate," he continued. "I'm here to own what I did. I turned love into an experiment. I reduced you to a variable. And when you walked away, I realized something I've never allowed myself to feel before." She waited, arms crossed, eyes unwavering. "I was afraid," he said. "Not of losing my money. Of losing control. Of believing someone could love me without conditions." Claire's breath caught, just slightly. She hated that part of her, still recognized the man she'd fallen for, the one who listened, who remembered small things, who never raised his voice even when the world pressed in. But she also remembered the vault. The gold. The door. The silence. "You didn't just doubt me," she said. "You watched me." Victor flinched. "I know. Do you have any idea what that does to someone?" she asked. "To realize the person you trust most is hiding, waiting for you to fail?" "I do now." Another long pause. The hallway behind Claire was quiet, lived-in, human. Nothing like the polished corridors of Victor's estate. She had chosen this place deliberately, walls thin enough that nothing could be hidden, doors that didn't lock automatically. No illusions of safety. "You should go," she said at last. Victor's heart sank, but he nodded. "I will. But before I do, there's something you need to know." She hesitated, then opened the door a little wider. "What?" "I destroyed the test," he said. "All of it. The prenup. The vault setup. The surveillance access. I can't undo what I did, but I can make sure it never happens again." She searched his face for manipulation, for calculation. Found none. "That doesn't fix anything," she said quietly. "No," Victor agreed. "But it's a start." He turned to leave. "Victor," she said suddenly. He stopped. "Why did you really do it?" she asked. Not the polished answer. The real one. Victor faced her, shoulders heavy. "Because everyone I've ever trusted has eventually taken something from me," he said. "And I convinced myself that if you did too, it would hurt less if I was prepared." Claire's expression softened, not with forgiveness, but with understanding. "That's the problem," she said. "You were always preparing for me to leave." He had no answer. She closed the door gently. Firmly. Victor walked back to his car feeling lighter and heavier all at once. He had spoken the truth, but truth alone didn't guarantee redemption. Days passed. The media caught wind of the canceled prenup within hours. Speculation exploded. Headlines screamed about billionaire panic, secret breakups, financial exposure. Victor ignored them all. For the first time in his life, public perception felt irrelevant. What mattered was silence. Claire did not call. Victor returned to work, but his focus was fractured. Meetings blurred. Numbers lost their meaning. At night, he found himself scrolling through old photos, unposed moments, stolen smiles, the quiet intimacy that could never be staged or tested. On the fourth night, his phone rang. Claire. He answered immediately. "Hello. I'm not calling to reconcile," she said before he could speak. "I'm calling because there's something you need to see." An address followed. A time. No explanation. Victor arrived early. The place was a community center on the east side of the city. Old brick, cracked steps, a faded sign barely clinging to the wall. Inside, voices echoed, laughter and arguments and the scrape of chairs on linoleum. Claire stood near the entrance, arms folded, watching a group of teenagers clustered around a whiteboard. "What is this?" Victor asked quietly. "My life before you," she said. "I volunteer here. I always did. Even when I moved into your house." He watched as she greeted the kids by name, teased them, listened. One boy showed her a drawing. A girl asked for advice. There was no performance here. No reward. "I never told you," she continued, "because I didn't want it to become a charity line item. I wanted it to stay real." Victor felt something twist inside him. "I brought you here," Claire said, turning to face him, "because if you want to be in my life again, if you need to understand something, I don't need your money. I don't want your protection. I want partnership. And that means transparency, even when it's uncomfortable." "I can do that," Victor said. She shook her head. "You don't know that yet." She gestured toward the room. "Sit. Watch. Don't fix anything. Don't donate. Just observe." So he did. For 2 hours, Victor Hawley sat on a plastic chair and witnessed a world untouched by his influence. He listened to stories of struggle and resilience, of kids navigating lives with no safety nets, no vaults. He watched Claire move among them not as a savior, but as a constant, and slowly, painfully, he realized the truth. This was where her integrity came from. Not luck, not circumstance. Choice. When the session ended, Claire walked him outside. "This is who I am," she said. "If you ever test me again, you lose me forever." Victor met her gaze. "Then don't ever let me forget." She studied him for a long time. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said. "But I'm willing to see if you can change." Hope flickered fragile. "Uncertain. That's all I'm asking," Victor replied. They stood there as the sun dipped below the skyline, neither reaching for the other, yet but no longer walking in opposite directions. The hardest part was still ahead, because trust, once broken, doesn't return with grand gestures. It returns with consistency. And Victor Hawley had spent a lifetime proving he could build empires. Now, he had to prove he could build something far more difficult. Something honest. Asterisk. Victor's pulse thundered in his ears as he crouched behind the door of the vault room. listening to every small sound, every shuffle of movement, every breath that was not his own. The room smelled of polished wood and iron, a scent that now seemed suffocating. Beyond the door, his fiancée Claire moved with precise calm, lifting stacks of cash and shifting gold bars with an efficiency that made Victor's stomach twist. This was the ultimate test, one he had devised over weeks of suspicion, paranoia, and sleepless nights. Yet, as he watched, something unexpected took root in his chest, a mix of fascination and dread. Claire's hands didn't shake. Her expression didn't waver. But her eyes, those eyes were focused, calculating. Every move she made spoke of someone accustomed to power and decision, yet untouched by greed. Victor wanted to step out, to call her bluff, to catch her in some small act of deception, but he froze. He couldn't move without revealing himself. Every second stretched into eternity. Every thought sharpened into a knife of doubt and longing. Asterisk. The first test had been straightforward, just leave her alone with the vault for 30 minutes and observe. But Victor's plan had escalated, becoming a web of hidden cameras, pressure sensors, and coded locks. He wanted proof. Proof that she was trustworthy, proof that her heart could resist temptation, proof that love wasn't just another business transaction to her. But now, crouched behind the door, he realized he was asking for something impossible. Trust cannot be tested in silence. It cannot be measured by surveillance. It could only be felt, and what he felt now was a terrifying mix of admiration and heartbreak. Hours passed, though it felt like days. Claire continued her work, moving money into secure containers and cataloging the gold bars meticulously. Victor's mind raced with worst-case scenarios, rehearsing confrontations, imagining betrayals, planning explanations that would salvage dignity if she discovered him. Then came the moment that changed everything. Claire paused, looked directly at one of the empty corners of the room, and spoke aloud. "I wonder how it would feel to be trusted," she said softly, almost to herself. "To not have to prove anything. To not have to hide." Her words pierced Victor's chest. He realized that she knew somehow that someone was watching, not by evidence, but by intuition. It was as if she had understood that love cannot thrive under constant scrutiny. And in that moment, Victor understood the cruel truth of his own heart. He had built his empire to control everything, except the one thing that truly mattered. Victor stepped out before he could stop himself. The door creaked, and Claire spun around, her hands frozen mid-motion. Their eyes locked, and he saw a flicker of something he had not anticipated: relief. Not relief at being caught, but relief that she had been tested, and that he had finally confronted the truth of his own fears. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with unspoken words. "You," Victor began, his voice trembling despite his effort to sound commanding. "You could have—" "I know," Claire interrupted, calm but firm. "I could have taken everything. Every bit of gold, every stack of cash. But I didn't. Not because I'm afraid of consequences, but because I know who I am. I don't need your test to prove that. You do." Her eyes glistened with a mix of frustration and compassion, a gaze that cut deeper than any deception ever could. Victor sank into a chair, the weight of years of suspicion pressing down on him. He had controlled entire industries, manipulated deals worth millions, and outmaneuvered rivals who would have killed for his empire. But here, in this vault, facing the woman he had promised to marry, he realized that control had its limits. Trust, honesty, and love were beyond ledger entries, beyond surveillance, beyond contracts. They were human, and humans could never be controlled. The following weeks were a delicate negotiation, not of wealth, but of hearts. Victor dismantled the systems of observation he had put in place. Cameras, sensors, and locks were removed. The vault remained, but its contents were no longer the currency of trust, they were simply assets, as neutral as the walls that contained them. He returned to Claire again and again, not as a fiancé testing her loyalty, but as a man learning to be vulnerable for the first time in decades. Their conversations deepened into hours-long dialogues about fear, insecurity, and ambition. Victor admitted every calculated move he had made to test her, every sleepless night filled with imagined betrayals, every moment he had questioned the sincerity of her love. Claire listened, never interrupting, never judging, her presence steady like an anchor. And slowly, like ice melting under sunlight, the walls he had built around his heart began to give way. It was not a sudden epiphany. Change was gradual, iterative, almost painfully slow. Victor learned to delegate, to release control, to let go of the obsessive compulsion to know, to see, to monitor. Claire taught him that vulnerability was not weakness but courage. And with each lesson, he found himself seeing her not as a test subject, but as a partner, an equal. A soul unafraid of the world, even when the world was full of risk and uncertainty. One day, months after the vault test, Victor walked with Claire through the empty space that had once been the stage for his paranoia. He took her hand, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to check, to question, to plan for betrayal. He felt only trust, pure and unguarded. And he understood that love was not about control, it was about faith. Faith in the other person, and faith in oneself to survive the vulnerability that true intimacy demanded. On a quiet afternoon, they revisited the vault. Victor opened the door and let the sunlight spill over stacks of gold and cash. Claire stood beside him, calm, resolute. Victor turned to her and whispered, "I hid behind that door to see who you really were. But it turns out I was hiding from myself." She smiled gently, eyes shining. "And now?" "Now I trust," he said simply. "Without tests. Without traps. Without fear." They stepped out together, leaving the vault behind not as a symbol of wealth or power, but as a monument to a lesson learned too late, yet deeply felt, that no amount of money, no fortress, no strategy could ever buy the one thing that mattered most: love built on trust. The empire outside remained, as sprawling and formidable as ever, but within their hearts, a different legacy had been forged. It was not wealth, influence, or even ambition that defined them anymore. It was the fragile, priceless, and unrepeatable courage to believe in another human being, completely and without reservation. And as they walked hand in hand into the fading light, Victor finally understood that the test he had set for her had been the test he had most needed to pass himself, and that, in surrendering control, he had discovered the true measure of a life worth living.